Masechet Baba Kama Daf Kof Yod Chet, nearing the end of the Masechet, Anu Mishnah, Hagozel et Chavero, O Shehelva Hemenu, O Shefkid Lo Bayishuv, Lo Yachzir Lo Bamidbar. Almenat laset bamidbar, yachzir lo bamidbar. Someone who steals something from someone else, money, or he borrowed from him, or someone deposited an item with that person, and now it's time either he's a thief and he decides to return it, or the loan is due, or it's time to return that deposit. The person returning it cannot return it in the middle of the desert in an unsettled area where it's not safe. So the lender can say, no, I don't want to accept it here. Right, come, bring it to the house, give it to me in the city where I can safeguard it. I can take it home properly. You're finding me in the middle of the nowhere where there's bandits and it can be stolen. He doesn't have to accept it in that place. However, if when they first made the loan or deposit, he said, listen, I'm going to borrow this on condition that I'm going out into the desert, so I'm going to be there. Therefore, I want to be able to return it while we're in the unsettled area. So in that case, the person who gave it, the lender, or the owner of the item, does have to accept it officially in the unsettled area. We challenge this. Urminhu from a Braita, milveh shemishtalemet bechol makom, aveda upikadon en mishtalemin ela bimkoman. Challenges from the Resha that says a loan can be paid back in any place, whereas an item that you borrow or are watching for someone has to be paid back in its place. That makes sense for an item because you can't expect people to have to carry around the item all the way back home. But money, you have to accept anywhere. This is a contradiction to the Mishnah that did not make any distinction and said money also you cannot return in an unsettled area. Amar Rabbi Achikam, milveh nitena litava bechol makom, aveda ufikadon lo nitenu litava ela bimkoman. Rabbi said, actually, this baraita is not talking about the obligation of the person returning, but rather the rights of the person requesting. That someone who lends money has a right to claim it in any location, even if they're in the road, in the desert. He has a right to say, "Oh, this is it's time for my money back," and he can expect that the person should have the money and pay it back. Whereas if it's an item and it said, I lent you my lawnmower, and now we're in the middle of the desert, I say, oh, I need my lawnmower back. You can't expect him to be carrying around the lawnmower everywhere he goes. Rather, only back in their location, go back in the city, and then ask for the lawnmower back. Almenat laset bamidbar peshita. The Sefer said, if they made the loan or the deposit on condition that it will be returned in the unsettled area, then he's allowed to return it in the unsettled area. Well, isn't that obvious? You can make any condition, right? A condition I return it in space. That would be a valid condition. La siricha damar le leheve hai pikadon gabach da'ana lamidbar nafikna ve'amar le ihu ana lamidbar nami ba'ina lemipak I ba'ina lahadrin hu lach hatam mehadarna lach. We're talking about a case not where they made an official stipulation about it, but rather where the depositor, the giver, said to the person watching it, let it be with you, right? Watch this because I'm going out into the unsettled area. And the watchman said, oh, actually, I also need to go out into the unsettled area. And therefore, if he needs to return it because they're both going to be there, then he will return. It's not that he said on condition, but rather since they had a mutual understanding that both of them are going to be out of town, so that therefore that is a possibility, and it's valid if he returns it also out of town. Next Mishnah, Haomer lechavero gizalticha hilvitani. Hifkadata etzli ve'eni yodeh im hechezarti lecha, im lo hechezarti lecha, chayav leshalem. Someone comes to his friend, the Gemara is going to discuss, did his friend claim first that you owe me money or not? Okay, either way, a person comes and says, listen, I robbed from you, or you lent me money, or you gave me a lawnmower to use, and I don't remember, I'm not sure if I returned it to you, if I paid you back or not. In that case, he has to pay because he's not sure. Maybe he does owe. However, aval im amar lo eni yodeh im gezalticha im hilvitani im hifkadeta etzli patur milashalem. If he says in the first place, I don't really know if I stole from you in the first place, or if you even lent to me in the first place, or if you gave me something to wash for you, then he does not have to pay. In the Resha, he admitted that he definitely owes, so that's why he does have to pay, whereas in the Sefa, he never admitted that he necessarily owes anything. But in both cases, he is not sure if he currently owes. Now, what the Mishnah doesn't say is, did the other party claim something first or not? So we're going to bring that in. Itamad, maneli biadcha v'hala omed eni yodeya. Rav Huna v'Rav Yehuda amre chayav, v'Rav Nachman v'Rabbi Yochanan amre patur. If a claimant says, you owe me $100, and the other the defendant says, I don't know, I'm not sure if I owe you or not. So this is bari v'shema. The claimant is sure that he's owed $100, and the defendant is not sure if he does or not. He's not denying it, but he just doesn't know. So in that case, Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda say he does have to pay, and Rav Nachman and Rabbi Yochanan say he does not have to pay. Or what's at the root of their machloket? Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda amre chayav bari v'shema bari adif. Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda says he does have to pay because if you have someone with a certain claim and the other is uncertain, so the certain one will win out, right? He knows, so we should follow him, and you have to pay. Rav Nachman v'Rabbi Yochanan amir patur, okim amona b'chizkat mareh. Whereas the other two sages, no, does not have to pay because hamosi mechavero alav hareaya. Leave the money where it is until the other person can prove. Bring two witnesses that I owe you, and then I will pay. But right now, all you have is a certain claim, but it's not backed up. So you can't, I'm not sure, I can't, I'm not denying it, but I'm not agreeing either. You bring proof and then I'll pay you. Tenan. So now we're going to prove Rav Nachman and Rabbi Yochanan's opinion challenged to Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda. Mishnah says, Aval, im amar lo eni yodea, im hilvitani patur. Our Mishnah that we just learned in the Sefa says, if a person says, I'm not sure if you lent me money in the first place, he does not have to pay. Now, hechidami, what kind of case is this? If there was no claim, no claimant, the claimant didn't say anything, someone just came up to court and said, or came up to his friend and said, I'm not sure if you ever lent me. Well, in that case, then it would have to be the same case in the Resha. Resha nami de la katabat amai chayav. In the Resha also would be where there's no claim to begin with. So that means a person just comes to his friend and says, listen, I know I borrowed something from you. I don't know if I paid you back. But if there's no claim, why would you have to say that he is liable? He's the one that just admitted in the first place, I borrowed from you, but I'm not sure I paid back. So, Hapesh Asaru, Hapesh Yitir. He's the one that created the knowledge that there was a loan, but he doesn't know if he should pay back. How can you force him? There was no claim to begin with. Ela de katabat le v'katani sefa patur milashalem. Rather, the resha certainly must be where there was a person claimed, you owe me money. The other person admits, oh yes, I did borrow from you, but maybe I'm not sure if I paid you back. There it would make sense to say that he is liable. So therefore the sefa is also where there is a claim, and it says patur. So that means someone said, you owe me money, and another person says, I don't know. All right, that's the case of the sefa of the Mishnah, and that's exactly the same as the case that they were arguing about. And it says patur, which is a proof for Rav Nachman and Rabbi Yochanan, a challenge to Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda. So we answer, Lo leolam de la katabat le v'resha beba laset yedei shamayim. No, in fact, we're talking about both clauses of the Mishnah, there's no claimant. And so why is the person coming in the Resha? He wants to fulfill his obligation from heaven. Even though there's no claimant, he's trying to remember. He says, oh, you know what? I know that I did borrow from him, and I'm not sure if I paid back. So he's going to his friend and says, I want to be totally clear. I want to fulfill my obligation to you and to heaven. And since I know that I borrowed from you, but I'm not sure if I paid back, so then he has to pay back just in case, even when there's no claimant. And therefore the sefa also could be where there's no claimant. And so he's only patur because there was no claim. But if there was a claim, then he would have to pay. And that's what Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda said. So that's the answer. Now that we use this argument, Babalasit Yadeh Shamayim, to help out Rav Yehuda and Rav Huna, we see that this is also useful for Rabbi Yochanan. Even though Rabbi Yochanan disagreed, in a different case, he also actually uses this very same argument. Itmar Nameh Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Hamelech Havero Maneh li biadcha, Vehala Omer Eni Yodea Chayav. If one person says, you owe me 100, that's bari, he knows for sure. And the other one says, I'm not sure. So actually, Rabbi Yochanan said in this case that patur, right? That was the case of patur. He doesn't have to pay. However, he is chayav if he wants to fulfill his obligation in terms of heaven, right? Even though from the letter of the law, he can say, listen, I'm not sure. You bring proof. You bring two witnesses. So in a court, he wouldn't have to pay. But if he wants to be totally clear, even from heaven, then he would have to pay, and Rabbi Yochanan would agree to that. So just like you say that here, so too you can say in the Resha, even though there's no claimant, you could say chayav. That means, according to Rav Huna, Rav Yehuda, means that he wanted to fill his obligation to heaven. Next Mishnah, Hagonev talem min ha'eder v'hecheziro, umet o nignav chayav ba'achariyuto. Someone goes and steals a lamb from someone else's flock, and then he also returns it. However, after he returned it, he returned it without telling the owner. So it's stolen, he returned it, but he didn't tell the owner, and it dies or it gets stolen by someone else. The first thief is responsible because he didn't let the owner know that he returned it. And so he's going to snuck back. Is that sufficient? You steal something, you sneak back in and return it. Does that mean nothing happened? No, you took ownership over it. You took responsibility over it when you stole it, and therefore returning it is not enough. You have to tell the owner. However, lo yadu ba'alim lo bignevato velo b'chazirato umanu et hason ushlemahi patur. However, if the owner never knew that it was stolen in the first place, and also never knew that it was returned, and he counts all the sheep, he knows he has 20 sheep, he counts them, all 20 are accounted for, then once he does that, so the owner takes back responsibility from it being stolen, and even though he doesn't know it was returned, and actually never even knew it was stolen in the first place, once he counts it, he takes responsibility back, and then if the sheep dies after that, he is not liable. Gemara is going to bring 4 different interpretations of this Mishnah, of exactly which cases we're talking about. Did the owner know that it was stolen or not know? In which case, there's 2 clauses, the Resha and the Sefa. The Resha is assuming that he knew that it was stolen, but didn't know it was returned. The Sefa is that he didn't know it was stolen or returned. Okay, there's going to be different interpretations. Amar Rav, number 1. לדעת צריך דעת, שלא לדעת מניין פותר, וכי קטנה ומנו את אסון והיא שלמה אספה. Rav says if the owner knew it was stolen, then he has to have awareness that it was returned, right? He saw that it was stolen, then the thief has to come, knock on the door and says, I am returning it. And once he returns it, then he's off the hook. But if he just deposits it back, so not good enough. He will be responsible even if it dies. However, if the owner never knew it was stolen, then it's enough that just to return it also in secret, and as long as the owner counts all the sheep and they're all there, then that's it. The thief is not responsible. So according to that reading, when it says when one counts, then and the full count is there, he is not no longer liable. That is only talking about the sefa when the owner didn't know it was stolen in the first place. But this does not apply to the resha. The resha where the owner knows it was stolen, the counting is not enough. He actually has to be told specifically, here, I am returning your sheep. Ushmuel Amar ben ledat ben shelo ledat minyan poter. Shmuel is more lenient on the thief, and he says whether the owner knew that it was stolen in the first place or didn't know it was stolen in the first place, doesn't matter. As long as the thief returns it and the owner counts up his sheep and all 20 are there, then that's it. The robber is off the hook. According to Shemuel, the last line that says, as long as you count it, then the robber is off the hook, that is going on both the Resha and the Sefa. A third opinion is V'Rabbi Yochanan Amar ledaat minyan poter shelo ledaat afilu minyan nameh lo sarich. Rabbi Yochanan is the most lenient. He says if the owner knew it was stolen, then it's sufficient that that the robber return it, and the owner count it. So you see that the last line, as long as you count it, the robber is not liable. That's talking about the first case where the owner knows it was stolen. And let's say the owner didn't know it was stolen, well then he doesn't even have to count. If it's just in the middle of the night, the robber goes, takes it, after a half hour he feels bad, nah, I don't want to do that, he returns it, that's it. And then it dies after, the robber is not responsible because the owner never knew that it was stolen in the first place. So that's the most lenient on the robber. Rav Chisda Amar, Rav Chisda is the opposite of Rav. He says, Ledat minyan poter, shelo ledat sarich dat. V'chi katani umanu et hason, v'hi shelema ad hesha. Rav Chisda says, if the owner knew that it was stolen, then as long as he counted, since he knew it was stolen, so he knows there's 19, he counts and sees that there's 20 because it was returned, so now he knows it was returned, so that's sufficient, and then once he counts, the robber will not be responsible. So you see that Rav Chisda agrees that the counting goes on the Resha. In that sense, in that one sense, he agrees with Rabbi Yochanan. However, he's more stringent in saying that if the owner never knew that it was stolen, then he has to specifically be told that it was returned. Because he did not know it was stolen, and so he didn't even know to look out for it, so he has to be told it was returned. We're going to explain Rav Chisda right now. Amar Rava. My ta'ama de Rav Chisda, ho'il v'an keta nigre baraita. How come Rav Chisda requires that when the owner didn't know it was stolen, that he has to be specifically told it's being returned? Why is it enough that he just count it up and see that it's there? The reason is because once the thief takes it out, he's teaching the lamb that it can go far out. It can go past the border. The lamb, its whole life is in the pen, so that's easy to watch it. Once the thief takes it out, a whole new world for the lamb. Oh, look at this, right? I can venture out, and so now it's going to be harder to supervise. So you have to tell the owner, listen, this is the lamb here that I stole, right? Sorry about that. And then the owner will know this one was stolen, it ventured out, and he can watch it properly. But you have to tell him so that you have to tell him it was stolen, so that he can see that it's washed properly. Now, from the fact that it was Rava who asked the question and explained and helped explain Rav Chisda, it sounds like Rava agrees with Rav Chisda. So we challenge that. Mi amar Rava hachi, does Rava agree with Rav Chisda that as long as the owner knew that it was stolen, it's enough just to count it? V'amar Rava, hayman dechaziyah lechavre de'agba imra me'adre dide, urma be'kala v'shadye, v'la yada'i hadre ila hadre, umet o nignav haya my love, afagav demane. Rava said that if a person sees someone else picking up a lamb in his flock to steal it, and he's there, he's watching it, so he knows that it's about to be stolen, and he cries out and yells and says, "Go away, thief, put that down." And then he sees the thief run away, but he's not sure if the thief took the animal with him or returned it. And at some point later, it dies or is stolen by someone else, the robber is responsible. That's what Rava said. Now, what's the case we're talking about? Is it not that the owner went and counted? Is it presumably that he suspects that one of his sheep was counted? So wouldn't he go out and count them? And therefore, he knew that it was stolen, right? Because he saw him potentially walk out or run out with it. And then he counted, and they were all there. And according to Rav Chisda, if the owner knows and then is counted, the robber is no longer liable. So why would Rava teach here that he is liable? And the answer is lo de la maneh. No, we're talking about a case where the owner did not count it. Since he didn't count it, and certainly he wasn't told and he didn't know, that's why the robber is still responsible. And now we have a challenge against Rav. Mi amar Rav hachi, did Rav really say that when the owner did not know that it was stolen, that it's enough just to count it, and then it's returned? He didn't know it was stolen, and then it's returned. returned. As long as he counts it, then the robber is not responsible. Is that true? Rav also said that if someone stole something and then returned it in a faraway area, that the owner isn't there, he has a pen or a shepherd that's out in the unsettled area, and that's sufficient. Well, in that case, the owner would not have known that it was returned and would not have been able to count it either. So why would Rav say that he fulfilled his obligation? It should not be fulfilled. Rav Chanan bar Abba modeh Rav bidku'ata. So Rav Chanan bar Abba explains that Rav here is talking about a case of a spotted sheep. Because it's spotted, it's the only spotted one in his herd. The owner would look out and says, "Where's the spotted sheep?" And he would notice immediately that it's gone. And therefore, this is the same as if he actually knew that it was stolen. And just like he knew it was stolen because it's distinctive, when it's returned, also the shepherd who's there will see it and recognize it and know that it was returned. That's why Rav says it doesn't matter where it's returned, even if he didn't know specifically it was stolen, he'll realize it was stolen because it's so distinctive. We next propose that the following Baraita includes within it all four of the opinions of the Amoraim that we saw are going to be included as a machloket between Tanaim in the following Baraita. Although there's only two Tanaim, but there's also two cases, so 2 times 2. We can find all four opinions. Hagonev taleh min ha'eder v'sela min ha'kis l'makom sheganav yachzir diber Rabbi Yishmael. V'Rabbi Akiva omer sarich da'at be'alim. Someone who steals a sheep from a herd, or he steals a coin from someone's purse. So now he has to return it. So according to the Ishmael, he just returns it to where he got it from. He doesn't have to tell the owner. Just he's a pickpocket. Just like he pickpocketed it out, he can pickpocket it back in without the owner realizing it. Whereas Rabbi Akiva says in both cases, you have to tell the owner, listen, I took this out of your purse, I want to return it. I took the sheep and I want to return it. Okay. Savaruha tekule amait lehud Rabbi Yitzchak. Tamar Rabbi Yitzchak Adam asul mashmesh bechiso bechol sha'a. We're going to assume right now, for the purpose of this argument, that everybody agrees with Rabbi Yitzchak, who says that people are always counting their money in their pocket, in their purse. They're always checking to look to make sure nothing fell out or no one stole anything. And therefore, we can assume that the guy had 10 coins in it before and someone stole one. He's going to be looking in a few minutes and he's going to notice, oh, there's only 9, it was stolen. And therefore, the case of the purse is one where he knows that something was stolen. And now we have a machloket when one knows it was stolen. So are they not arguing on this very matter? Maila besela ledaat ubeplukta derav ushmuel. And Rabbi Akiva, who says that you have to return it to the person specifically, that would be what Rav says, that if you know it was stolen, you have to know when it was returned. Whereas Rabbi Ishmael would agree with Shemuel, or the other way around, Shemuel the Amorah would agree with Rabbi Ishmael that it's enough that it's counted, right? And just like when it's stolen, he's counting every few minutes and sees it was 9. As long as the pickpocket, right, puts it back in, even without the owner knowing, but we assume the owner counts every few minutes and then they'll count some time later and said, oh, look, now it's 10. It was returned. Okay, he doesn't know who took it, but it doesn't matter. Once that happens, the robber is off the hook. Even if that purse gets stolen by somebody else later, the first robber is not responsible as long as the owner counted when it was gone and counted when it came back. He's good, because he knew about it. Actually, according to Shemuel, even if he never realized it was gone, right? As long as it was counted at some point and then stolen by the second guy after, the first robber is off the hook. Okay, so there we see within the case of the purse, the machlok between Rav and Shemuel. Now we're going to propose that the other case regarding the sheep has the other machloket in it. Now, in printed edition, it says the word la as if it's rejecting the point before, but this word should not be there. If you can see here in the Vilna printing, actually the word la is in parentheses to be erased, and that's correct. It should be erased because you see in all of the manuscripts the word la is not there. So this is not rejecting rejecting what we just saw, but continuing. If the case of purse tells us the machlok between Rav and Shemuel, and then betaleh shelo ledat upluktat Rav Chisda v'Rabbi Yochanan. Why mention two cases? The case of the sheep, that's where the owner didn't know, because unlike a purse where people are always counting their money, people are not constantly counting their sheep unless they can't sleep. So this is a case where the owner didn't know. And here also Rav Chisda would be the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, that you have to, since he didn't know, you have to return it and tell him, because now it learned how to go past the pen, and now it's going to have to be guarded more carefully. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan follows the opinion of Rabbi Ishmael, that if he didn't know it was gone, you don't have to tell him it was returned. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you don't need anything. You don't even have to count it. So even if he didn't count it since it was stolen, or from before it was stolen, it doesn't matter. As long as the thief takes it and returns it, that's it. He did his obligation, and if it dies or is stolen after, the thief is not responsible. So now we have all four Amoraim are built into this machloket Tanaim. So is this a good proposal? We reject it. Amar Rav Zevin Mishmed Rava Bishomer Sheganav Mereshut Baalim Kule Amala Pelige Ked Rav Chisda V'acha Bishomer Sheganav Mereshuto Sheyachzir L'makom Sheganav Kami Palge. Rabbi Akiva Sabar Kalta Lo Shemirato Rabbi Ishmael Sabar Lo Kalta Lo Shemirato. Rav Zevin, in the name of Rava, says actually it could be that everybody agrees with Rav Chisda. This makes sense. Remember Rava before, he's the one that defended Rav Chisda, which meant he agreed with them. So he wants all the Tanaim to be on Rav Chisda's side. And therefore he says, if it's a shomer, a custodian, who steals from the owner's field, so he went. Although he's a watchman, but he goes into the owner's field and takes something. So everyone would agree that we would follow Rav Chisda. If he knew, then he has to count it first, and if he didn't know, he has to let him know. But this baraita, machloket between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Ishmael, are talking about a different case of a shomer who steals it from his own domain. In other words, someone gave him a sheep to watch. Okay, he's watching the sheep, and he decides he's going to steal the sheep that he is meant to watch. So he didn't go into someone else's property. He took it from his own property, and now he took it somewhere else. He's stealing it. He's on his way to take it to a different place. But then he changed his mind and he returns it. So he returns it back to his own home where he was supposed to keep it the whole time. That's where the machloket is. Rabbi Akiva says once he removes it from the place that it's supposed to be, so now he is a thief and his guardianship ends. He's no longer a guard. And therefore, if it gets stolen from him at that time, the thief is responsible because he doesn't have the exemptions that a shomer would, or if it dies. Where Rabbi Ishmael said, no, even though he took it away with intention to steal it, but now he returned it, he is still called a shomer, and a shomer is not liable if it gets stolen or lost, not because of his negligence. So therefore, he is not responsible. So we're talking about they're arguing on a different case completely. But if it was actually stolen from a different place by the shomer or by anyone, in fact, then they would all agree with Rav Chisda. Lema minyan poter tanaehi. Now a new proposal. Does counting get the robber off the hook and no longer responsible? That is a machloket between the following Tanaim. Can we propose that? Did Tanya hagozel et chavero v'bliya lo b'cheshbon taneh hada yasa v'tanya idach lo yasa. A robber steals a lamb from someone else, and the victim realizes that the lamb was stolen, and now the robber he feels bad. He wants to pay back the owner for the amount, but he's embarrassed to come in and confront him and say, oh, I stole and here's the thing back. He wants to return the money in a subtle way. And so here's what he does. He goes and buys something, the thief, the robber buys something from the owner, but he overpays, right? And he overpays by the amount that stolen lamb was worth. So in that case, right, where the question is, does he realize that it was returned? Was the money returned? So now we'll talk about that in a second. Now there's two Baraitot about this case. Tanech Hadayasa. One says the robber fulfilled his obligation because he returned the money. That's okay. And the other version says no, it's not sufficient. He has to go and tell him directly. Now Sivaru Hadekula Amait Lehu de Rabbi Yitzchak. Tamad Adam Asur leMashmesh Bechiso Bechol Sha'a VeSha'a. Umayla B'Hakami Palge. Deman Saba Damar Yasa Savar Minyan Poter. Uman Damar Lo Yasa Savar Minyan Eno Poter. Right now, let's propose that everyone agrees with the opinion of Rabbi Yitzchak that it's human nature, a person counts his money all the time. And therefore, when he gets, let's say he had sold something for $1,000, and so he's expecting $1,000 coins to be in his wallet, and now he counts and he sees there's 1,100 extra overpayment, and the overpayment was for the lamb that was stolen. So therefore, this is the same as counting, right? He sees that the money was returned. So then the machloket seems to be as follows. One opinion, the opinion that says he fulfilled his obligation, thinks that as long as you count, it's okay. That would be the opinion of Shemuel. Whereas the opinion, the Braita that says you did not fulfill the obligation, he would say like Shemuel, because he knew he was stolen from, it's not sufficient if he just counts and sees everything is there. The robber has to specifically go and say, I am returning this item. Since when he stole it, it was a full stealing with knowledge of the owner. The return also has to be a full return with knowledge of the owner. Or is sufficient to count. So it seems that this is a parallel machloket. Amri isabir alan kerebi Yitzchak ul amala pligi deminyan poter. Ela b'Rabbi Yitzchak kami palge mor it le Rabbi Yitzchak umor let le Rabbi Yitzchak. So the answer is no. If you follow Rabbi Yitzchak that people are always counting, then everybody would agree that counting is enough. In other words, both Tanaim of both of those Baraitot would agree that if you follow Rabbi Yitzchak, then they would follow Shemuel, that people count all the time, and then in this case he would be off the hook. That's not what the machloket was about. That's not the case. Rather, they're arguing about whether we can assume the statement of Rabbi Yitzchak at all. The Baraita that says that he's off the hook, says Yasa, that's assuming that law is with Rabbi Yitzchak, that people always count, and therefore there was a count, and you're good. Whereas the other Braita says, Lo Yasa, disagrees with Rabbi Yitzchak in the first place. He says, people don't always count their money, and therefore the owner will not have realized that it was even returned, will not have even counted. And even Shemuel would say that if you don't count, and then it dies or gets stolen, then the first robber is responsible. And so actually, both Baraitot can be the opinion can follow the same opinion as Shemuel. Or yet another answer: Tekula amait lehu Rabbi Yitzchak v'lakashaha demane urma le bekise v'ha demane urma lide. Or it could be that in fact both Baraitot would agree with Rabbi Yitzchak that a person counts their money all the time, and the difference is when the robber returned the money and to overpay for that item, if he put it in the owner's purse, well then the owner may not know how much was in the purse, and so even if he's counting, he doesn't know how much was in there. Was in there to begin with, and how much there is now. So he would not be aware, and that's why lo yasa. Whereas he put it in his hand, it's in his hand, so now he knows he's going to count what's in his hand, and then he'll realize that it's an overpayment, and that's why yasa. Or yet another answer, or both could be when he actually put it in the purse, with whatever he bought with the overpayment. And one is where he had other money in the purse, and he doesn't know necessarily how much money. Now it's all mixed in. In that case, the owner did not realize the overpayment, and that's why lo yasa. Whereas the Braita that says he fulfilled his obligation is where there was no other money. He knew the purse was empty, and now he can see see, oh, that there was supposed to be only 1,000 that he paid. I see now he paid 1,100, so that's the same as counting, and that's why we're following Shemuel. And he fulfilled his obligation of returning because the owner counted how much money and sees that the amount of what was stolen has now been returned. Next Mishnah, En lokhin min haroim semer vechalab ugdayim velo mishomere perot esim uferot. One is not allowed to buy stolen goods, and that includes things that are likely to be stolen. And therefore, you have a shepherd, he's watching someone else's animals. You can't buy from the shepherd milk or small animals because it's likely that the shepherd is just stealing them from the owner without the owner's permission, selling them and making some money on the side. You also are not allowed to buy produce from people who are watching the produce. This is a watchman, and so he's only there to watch it, or trees that he's watching, because then he's probably taking some of the fruit or taking some of the wood from the trees. He's the watchman, so who's going to catch him without the owner's knowledge? But that's stolen property. One is permitted to buy from a married woman woolen goods in Yehuda. Women in Yehuda, that's where there's a lot of wool, and they would work with wool, their own, that of theirs and their husbands. And we don't assume that the woman is stealing this wool, in other words, not telling her husband, and then selling it on the side. You don't have to worry about that. It's theirs. It's together. And if she's selling it, it means that she has the husband's permission. Also, linen in the Galilee, that's where linen was usually grown. And also, calves in Sharon, that's where there were calves, and the woman would take care of them. If they sell it, you can assume that it's with permission. But in all these cases, if the seller says, listen, just hide this, right? Don't show it to anyone, then it's prohibited, because that means they have something to hide. They don't want to see, they don't want people to see, oh, where'd you get that nice wool from? Oh, I bought it from that person. Then they'll go to that person and they'll be found out if in fact, so if they're saying hide it, it means that they probably are stealing it, and that's why they want you to hide it. Otherwise, they would say, show it off. It would get more customers. Now, eggs and chickens, one can buy in any place. These are just very cheap commodities. People aren't going to go steal them from the owner to resell them. So you can assume that all those are sold with permission. We have a Braita that expands on the Mishnah. Tanu Rabbanan. En lochim min haroim lo izim velo gedayim lo gizin velo telushin shel semer. Aval lochim mehen tefurim mipnei shehen shelahen velochin mehen chalav ugvina bamidbar velo bayishuv. One cannot purchase from shepherds goats or kids or fleeces or torn pieces of wool. That's fleeces is when it's shaven, and torn, it's when they torn a little bit of hair at a time off of it, because in all these cases, it's likely that the shepherd is stealing it and selling it without permission of the owner. However, if it's a sewn garment, then you can assume that it belongs to the shepherd himself. Shepherd would sell raw material, but not something that's all sewn and the finished product. Then it's probably his himself, and he has permission to sell it. And then you can buy milk and cheese in an unsettled area, but not in a settled area. In the unsettled area, this is far away from where the owner lives, and so how are you going to get the milk all the way back to the owner? You're in the middle of nowhere, so the milk is just going to go to waste. So therefore, it's likely that the shepherd has permission from the owner to sell the milk and the cheese when you're out in the wilderness. But if you're in the settled area near the city, then the owner, we suspect, will want the milk to come back to him and does not want it to be sold, and therefore it's stolen. Velochin mehen 4 son, 4 gizin, aval lo shete son velo shete gizin. Well, Braita continues and says one is allowed to buy 4 or 5 sheep from a shepherd, or 4 or 5 fleeces, but not just 2 sheep or 2 fleeces. The reason is, if you buy a lot, then the owner is likely to realize, right? Before you had 20, we'll see the ratios the Gemara will discuss. Before you had 20, and now you're down to 15, the owner's going to realize immediately, hey, we asked the shepherd, where's the other 5? So the shepherd is not going to steal and sell so many. But if it's only 2, so then there's 2 less. The owner may not spot that realize that there's 2 missing. So a shepherd would steal and sell 1 or 2. He wouldn't steal and sell 4 or 5. You're asking, what about 3? Of course, the Gemara is going to answer that too. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Bayitot lochin mehen, midbariyot en lochin mehen. Rabbi Yehuda distinguishes between domestic animals that are near the home of the owner. Those you can buy from the shepherd, because since they're near the home of the owner is looking and he's going to notice if there is some missing. Whereas if it's out in the wilderness, not where the owner is, and the owner just tells the shepherd, go out far away and take care of the animals, the owner is not going to notice if they are missing, and so then it's more likely that the shepherd will steal them and sell them without the owner knowing. Klalo shel davar. Here's the rule that will cover all the bases. Kol sheharo'eh mocher ubal habayit margish bo lochin mehen, en margish bo en lochin mehen. Any case where if the shepherd would sell it, the owner would realize, so then you can assume that he has permission from the owner and you can buy it from the shepherd. But in any case where the owner would not realize, and you can assume that the owner would not realize that these things are missing, then you have to assume that the shepherd may be stealing it and selling it without the owner's permission, and therefore you cannot buy from them. That's the baraita. Now we're going to analyze some parts of it. Amar mor, lochin mehen 4 son 4 gizin, hashtay yeshlomar 4 zanbinan, 5 mibaya. So it says that you can buy 4 or 5 sheep or 4 or 5 fleeces. So if we know that you can buy 4, then all the more so you can buy 5, because the more that you buy, the more likely it is that the owner will realize. So why do you have to say 4 or 5? Just say 4. Amar Rav Chisda 4 mitoch 5. So Rav Chisda says no, it's not 4 or 5, it's 4 out of 5. That's the ratio. You can buy 4/5 of the flock, or however many he has. He has 100, you can buy 80. V'ika da'amre amar Rav Chisda 4 me'ayeder katan ve5 me'ayeder gadol. Or another version of the answer is 4 is for a small flock and 5 is for a big flock. The point is that it's going to be a number that will be noticeable by the owner just by looking. Aha gufa kashya. And now we have a contradiction within the Braita. Amat 4 ו5 son, 4 ו5 gizin, 4 ו5 in, aval 3 la. Emasefa aval lo shete son, ha-3 zabninan. In the beginning of the Braita, it says that if it's 4 or 5 animals or 4 or 5 fleeces, one is allowed to buy, so that means 4 or 5 you're allowed, but 3 would not be allowed, too little. But the continuation says, but if it's 2, then you're not allowed to buy. That means 2 you're not allowed to buy, but 3 you are allowed to buy. So 3 falls right in the middle. Which one is it? What do we do with 3? La kasha ha bebariyata ha bichishata. So 3 is in the middle because it depends. If it's a nice, healthy, robust animal, then the owner will be attentive to them and say, oh, look, where are those 3 big, strong animals that I had? And so, in that case, you're allowed to buy them because the owner would notice. But if it's 3 small, weak animals that the owner is not going to pay so much attention to, then you wouldn't be allowed to buy them because the owner would not notice that they were missing and the shepherd would steal them. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Bayatot lochin mehen, midbariyot en lochin mehen. Rabbi Yehuda, he added on to the Braita that there's a distinction between animals near the home that you can buy because the owner will realize, and those in the desert where the owner won't realize, and so you cannot buy them. We ask Rabbi Yehuda, Ibaya lehu, Rabbi Yehuda aresha ka'e ul chumra od yamasefa ka'e ul kula. What's the relationship between Rabbi Yehuda and the law that was there previously? Is Rabbi Yehuda modifying the resha regarding 4 or 5 animals, and he's being stringent, or is he modifying the sefa about 2 animals and he's being lenient? We elaborate. Is he modifying the resha? And he's saying, and he's being stringent as follows. The resha said you're allowed to buy 4 or 5 animals, but that, Rabbi Yehuda says, is only if there's 4 or 5 animals and they're near the house. Then the owner will realize because they're near him and it's a lot of animals. However, if it's out in the desert, even 4 or 5, you're not allowed to buy. You can't any amount. You can't buy even a lot of them out in the desert because the owner's just not around, so he's not going to notice even many of them if many of them are missing. Or is Biuda's statement modifying the sefa, and he's being lenient, and where sefa says you cannot buy 2 animals or just 2 fleeces because that's not noticeable. But that stringency, that prohibition, only applies out in the desert. If it's out in the desert and it's only a couple of animals, the owner will not notice. However, if it's near his home, then even 2, the owner will notice, right? He's looking around. He sees that he'll notice that there are 2 missing, and therefore near the home you can buy even just 2 animals. That's the question, and we have an answer. Tashema detanya, Rabbi Yehuda omer, lochin bayatot mehen, venochin mehen midbariyot. B'chol makom lochin mehen 4 ו5 son. B'damar b'chol makom shema'amina. Asefa ka'e ulkula shema'amina. Here is a braita quoting Rabbi Yehuda saying that the distinction, one can buy the domestic animals near the owner, but one cannot buy animals that are out in the wilderness. But then this braita adds, but in any place, no matter where, you can buy 4 or 5. So since it says in all places, right, even out in the wilderness, you can buy 4 or 5. So that means that Rabbi Yehuda was modifying the sefa, and he is giving a leniency. The only case that wouldn't be allowed is if it's 2 or 1 or 2 out in the wilderness. It's very little and it's far away where the owner isn't there. There it's likely that the shepherd can steal them and resell stolen goods. However, in all other cases, it would be permitted. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.